Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Richardson Chamber of Commerce Women in Leadership Virtual Quarterly Luncheon. My name is Amy Spahn, and I'm the CEO of the Warren Center and a member of the Women in Leadership Committee. The purpose of WIL is to inspire, influence, and champion powerful women through advocacy, mentoring, and networking. We're excited that so many of you are able to attend and embrace the virtual norm we're becoming accustomed to. We have a wonderful guest speaker today that will talk to us about resilience despite adversity. This presentation will be interactive with poll questions and Q&A. Whether this is your 10th luncheon or your first, we hope it won't be your last. At the end of the program, we'll tell you how you can get more involved with the Women in Leadership and different committees that we have to support your growth in leadership in the community. We could not have done this outstanding programs without our equally outstanding partners and sponsors. Our title sponsor is Methodist Richardson Medical Center, represented today by President Ken Hutchenreiter. Ken, I believe you have a few words of welcome you'd like to say to everyone.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our, I guess it's our last Women in Leadership meeting for the year. We've been very proud this year to sponsor the Women in Leadership series. And I know that if you've watched them like I have, I think we've all gotten so much out of this. Just so proud to be a sponsor, as you can imagine, being in healthcare. I have a very, very strong women's presence as far as within our leadership team. And just am so proud of all of the women in my leadership team and the way that they continue to move into new heights of management. And so, especially during this time of COVID-19, we've certainly been stretched to the max, and they have just responded so strong and so wonderfully. So I'm very, very proud of our team and just proud that we're able to sponsor this and present this to all of the ladies of our community through the Richardson Chamber. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. We're pleased to have an associate sponsor of Women in Leadership program, Texas Bank and Trust. Texas Bank and Trust is a strong commitment to service excellence. The bankers who have served customers' financial needs for many years continue to provide the same efficient, personalized service you have come to expect. The bankers are the people you know, the bankers you trust. Now more than ever, Texas Bank and Trust. Please join me in thanking our major sponsors. We'd also like to thank our virtual table sponsor today, Geico. Thank you all for sponsoring our event today. We are deeply grateful for your support of our programs. I'd also like to recognize the Richardson Chamber of Commerce Chairman and Chairman of the Board, Stan Bradshaw, who's with us today. Stan, we appreciate your support of Women in Leadership and thank you for attending. As many of you know, December Luncheon is our annual charity event for Women in Leadership Committee. The charity is chosen by our speaker. This year's charity is the Richardson Isd Foundation, which funds student scholarships, professional development grants for teachers, grants for programs to meet special needs, grants for student experiences, and program supplies. We ask you that you visit their website at www.richardsonisdfoundation.org to see how you can help out this great organization this year. You will also find a link to donate right here in the chat in the Zoom meeting. A quick reminder to make yourselves on mute while we have our speaker today. And now to introduce our guest today. Catherine Cuer is City Dallas Director of Communications, Outreach, and Marketing, is a proud product of Richardson ISD Public Schools, Canyon Creek Presbyterian Church, and Toby School of Dance. She started her public radio career in Los Angeles and spent the past couple of years living in Brooklyn, New York, but Dallas keeps calling her home. She lives in Oak Cliff with her husband, Paul Williams, a music producer, recording engineer, and a partner in State Fair Records. And together they serve on the board of Charter Albark's Music Foundation. Cuer is also an executive board member of the SMU Perkins School of Theology and serves on the board of directors for Presbyterian Church USA Board of Pensions. Cuer's sister, Laura Haney, nephew Robert, and nieces Olivia and Emily live on the same street where Catherine and Laura grew up. And Laura's kids at Presbyterian Elementary School are on track to be the family's third generation of J.J. Pierce's Mustangs. Her parents, John and Susan Cuer, are retired Tex-Mex restaurateurs, and her father serves on the board of the Richardson Education Foundation, which is the beneficiary of today's lunch. And now, Catherine, we'd love to have you speak.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And thank you. I feel like I'm on This Is Your Life because I'm seeing people from every age and stage of my life. But I'd like to start with a level set of a poll question to acknowledge the world we now live in and the environment we're all participating from. So what else is going on right now in the space that you're watching from? The poll will pop up in a second. You can respond. I thought of everything that is going on where I am. There may be other things not on my list. But given all that's going on, I'd like to start by thanking all of you for the gift of your time, our most precious non-renewable resource. Let's take a moment to center ourselves in the midst of whatever else may be competing for our attention by taking 3 deep breaths. And if you want, you can turn your camera off so you can close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and out. Take a second breath in and out. Take a third breath in and out. There are so many things beyond our control heightening our awareness for little things like the freedom and ability to breathe, ways we can be more present in each moment to be grateful and restore our health and sanity. So I'll ask Andrea to share our answers to the quiz. Pets are leading the pack, pun intended, but all of the above, I feel ya. So thanks again for having me. And before I share personally, rest assured, this is a story that does have a happy ending. In the spring of 2016, during 1 month, our condo in downtown Dallas was catastrophically flooded by our upstairs neighbor, with water pouring out of every light fixture, HVAC vent, and the breaker box, and with water blisters in the paint of the ceiling and walls inside and outside our apartment. My father-in-law was diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's, so could no longer drive. And my mother-in-law, who was legally blind and had relied on my father-in-law for her mobility and care, was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. At the same time, a strategic plan I initiated at a nonprofit where I worked culminated successfully in a reorganization which eliminated my job. So while we were technically homeless, I was then also unemployed. My college roommate is an attorney now studying to become a pastor. She says everyone wants to preach about examples of bad things happening to good people, but nobody wants to be the example. So since I joke that the title of my memoir could be What Not to Do, thank you for having me today, and I hope you can all learn from my example. Back to 2016. It was so overwhelming and intense that in hindsight, I realized I should have sought counseling or antidepressants to prevent needless suffering. Instead, in my entirely anecdotal and not at all scientific study, neither screaming nor crying got me desired results, though both were at times necessary, but only alone from inside my locked car, closet, or office, lest anyone overhear and think I was accidentally murdering someone. Dark chocolate also helped, and I try to always keep some with me, eating a single square like Popeye eats a can of spinach. It's my vitamin. I got heaps and loads of practice in patience, eventually becoming my own best advocate. On the phone with prospective employers, insurance adjusters, leasing agents, building contractors, property managers, and HOA board members. For best results, I usually ended up firmly but calmly stating, "Thanks for your time, but you are no longer able to assist me." Or, "May I please speak with your manager?" This even got me almost 80% off a new car battery that died as soon as the warranty expired, which was just after I had taken it to the shop and been told it was fine. The title of my presentation is Resilience Despite Adversity. So let's cue up the second poll question. What does resilience mean to you? I'll wait for the question to appear and give everybody a moment to answer. So after I got laid off, my Uncle Dave, who is an alumnus of J.J. Pierce High School, called to joke with me because he is still the most laid off member of our family. He once relocated out of state for a job, which laid him off a couple of months later. He shared his hard-earned recipe for getting through the time between stable employers, advising I do 3 things every day. First, physical exercise. Take a walk, go for a bike ride, run or walk up flights of stairs, or throw punches in a boxing gym. In the years since, I've done all these things depending on how much steam I need to blow off. Second, spiritual care. Meditate, pray, journal, volunteer. Do something to connect with my higher power, count my blessings, and maintain perspective. When my uncle was in job seeking mode, he would take extra volunteer shifts to deliver Meals on Wheels. Third, look for a job. Searching for a job is a full-time job. It is work, and you have to dress, shower, and practice for it every day, whether you feel like it or not. Constant rejection is demoralizing, which is why it must be paired with the physical and spiritual exercise. I filed for unemployment, then used my unemployment debit card to pay all my job search expenses, including utilities like my cell phone and home internet bills. I bought people coffee for informational interviews. I bought office supplies like business cards and thank you notes. I paid for my gas tolls and parking when I went to job seeking activities and interviews. And my debit card statement turned into my log of job seeking activities when I filed for unemployment every other week for months. In the process, I became more resilient. Now let's take a look at the answers to our second poll question. Flexibility. Nobody had quickness. That's interesting. And nobody had thrift. Well, these were my, again, my experiences with resilience. But in the process of becoming more resilient, for those of you who said that resilience means something else, if you're comfortable sharing in the chat what resilience means to you, please do. And I also welcome your questions in the chat throughout the conversation, and there will be time for those at the end. So by the end of 2016, I had 2 job offers, and I accepted one from a social enterprise helping the uninsured and underinsured to afford their prescriptions, which was even more meaningful to me after several months paying COBRA with a pre-existing condition. And since this is a women's event and most women I know have a pre-existing condition, most humans I know have a pre-existing condition, I want to honor what a tense time this is, since many of us are not just the breadwinners, but also the benefits providers for not just ourselves, but other members of our households. And since we know tens of millions of people became unemployed during this pandemic, I'd like to urge all of you to get a flu shot to protect not just yourself and members of your household, but all of our most vulnerable neighbors. After 13 months, the owner of the unit above ours and our HOA finally accepted responsibility for flooding our condo, allowing us to complete the needed repairs. But by then we were so fed up with everybody, we decided it would be easier to sell the place than to continue having them as neighbors. My mother-in-law then lost her battle with cancer that summer. The week of her funeral, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law in Houston were evacuated by boat from their home in Hurricane Harvey. That winter, our Hurricane Harvey surviving brother-in-law in Houston, Walt, died in his sleep. Then in the spring of 2018, the startup where I had worked since working myself out of my previous nonprofit job had a reduction in force. So I got riffed again for the second time in as many years. I still had the unemployment debit card from my previous job search in my wallet when I started filing for unemployment again. But the second layoff didn't sting as much as the first because I was becoming more resilient. I say that job hunting in my 40s reminds me of dating in my 20s. After applying, how long do you wait to call and how often is too often to call a hiring manager? If people ask if you're willing to relocate, does saying yes make you more appealing or does it make you seem desperate? If somebody ghosts on you after an interview, it's kind of like in swipe culture on dating apps. Bots kick back rejection letters hours after hours and within minutes of submitting an application, which made me feel more like a number than a human. It was just like getting dumped when I was single. It's not me, it's them. Now, at this event and this series of events about being at your best, I don't mean to be a bummer by talking about it when I was at my worst, but I have grown to neither regret my past nor close the door on it. And in this hard luck year, these experiences increase my empathy for others. My J.J. Pierce High School psychology teacher, Bob Nelson, who I still visit with most months through a group he leads at Arapahoe United Methodist Church called Socrates Cafe, says empathy cannot be taught. It can only be modeled. And in this time of deep division and physical distance, I think cultivating empathy is as risky, but potentially as rewarding as anything else we may do. Again, since this is a women's event, I want to acknowledge that everybody, but especially every woman I know, is doing more than ever during this pandemic. Balancing family caregiving with full-time jobs and possibly also serving as a teacher's aide with online learning. And although data has shown that as women, we earn 80 cents on the dollar or less for the same work as our male counterparts, we are not less valuable. To say that another way, our value is not based on what we are paid. One of my mentors, Brenda Jackson at Encore, used to say, not all validation is external. That's hard for a firstborn, people-pleasing perfectionist like me to believe, but it's true. You are invaluable, whether or not your employer or family or anyone else has told you lately. And since we know more than 270,000 Americans have died this year from the coronavirus, including more than 1,200 in Dallas County, I want to hold a thought for every family whose holidays are forever changed by the loss of a loved one, and to all the healthcare and essential workers who continue to show up and deliver services, and especially all the women who are holding it together in both of those circumstances for their family and their community. No matter what your job is, or if you're in job search, may we count our blessings now and in the future, never taking our health or prosperity for granted. Now for a third poll question. Of the various stressors highlighted this year, 2020, what has concerned you the most? And again, if you have other concerns that you feel comfortable sharing in the chat, please do. So in the summer of 2018, my father-in-law died just a few months after his wife of more than 60 years. In hindsight, the stresses I endured from 2016 through 2018 were the strength and endurance training I needed to survive 2020. But adapting as necessary to endure hard times is not the same as wanting or deserving them. Again, adapting as necessary to endure hard times is not the same as wanting or deserving hard times. I wouldn't wish 4 moves, 3 family funerals, and 2 layoffs in 2 years on my worst enemy. But bad times come to us all sooner or later. And let me also be clear, I don't believe in a God who is doing this to us or failing to intervene. A girlfriend of mine who is in cancer treatment right now was telling me how even in treatment, she is mentoring other women facing the same procedures, which have successfully recently made her cancer-free. And she said, and that's why God gave me cancer, which broke my heart. I had to set the record straight. In my experience, people of faith become the kind of God they worship. So people who believe in a God of punishment and judgment are judgmental. I don't think that's good theology. Another friend of mine from Canyon Creek Presbyterian Church in Richardson says, let me check. When did God last ask for my help judging others? Oh yeah, never. I believe in healing and wholeness that comes first through being frail, flawed, and human. In Judaism, it's called tikkun olam, repairing our broken world through constructive, beneficial actions. I don't believe God gives anybody cancer, just as none of us deserves the headaches or the heartaches of this pandemic. But I believe these heartaches, headaches, and calamitous setbacks can be redeemed with help from a higher power. I didn't do something to deserve being tested to amuse a God who wanted to see if we'll fail or survive. But I do benefit from many privileges which enable me to successfully navigate these crises. So let's pause and take a look at our answers to our third question. And I'm seeing all of the great shares in the chat as well. I want to give thanks to everybody who is continuing to share there. If you answered other to any of these, please continue to share what's stressing you out in the chat, and rest assured you are not alone. Now, as was touted in the event description, which you registered for, I will share how my youth in Richardson helped prepare me for all of this. First of all, I loved my public school education in Richardson ISD at Prestonwood Elementary, Park Hill Junior High, and J.J. Pierce High School, which is one of the reasons I designated the Richardson Education Foundation as the beneficiary of today's lunch. I came of age when Texas was at the vanguard of scientific thought and innovation. And even though I ended up majoring in English in college, I love science. North Texas, when I was growing up here, had Texas Instruments, UT Southwestern, Southwest and American Airlines, and ExxonMobil, to name a few. And Houston had NASA, MD Anderson, and countless more energy giants. But when ET placed an intergalactic phone call home, he used a Texas Instruments speak and spell. Science has been a great friend to Texas, and my J.J. Pierce High School physics teacher, Richard Taylor, who was honored among the best teachers in the nation, even took us on a class field trip to the superconducting super collider in Waxahachie. My Richardson education also honed my communication skills. I made friends for life through my journalism classes, including retired Richardson High School journalism teacher, Sarah Scott, who is in attendance today. And after being the editor of my high school yearbook and college newspaper, I started writing for the Dallas Morning News while I was still in college and was a reporter for KERA after working in public radio for a few years in Los Angeles, California. Now, as Communications, Outreach, and Marketing Director for the City of Dallas, I oversee 4 cable access television channels and lead media relations and crisis communications in the nation's 5th largest media market. I greatly appreciate the essential role journalists play in safeguarding our democracy as government watchdogs. And I'm still telling stories and meeting deadlines. I'm just doing it now for elected and appointed officials, journalists, and the residents and taxpayers in the 9th largest city in the United States. My faith community in Richardson also nurtured me as a young leader and activist. When my friends from high school were rocking on the wild side, my church friends in the youth group at Canyon Creek Presbyterian Church kept me on the up and up. I now volunteer through First Presbyterian Church of Dallas as a confirmation partner. And as was mentioned in the introduction, I'm on the board of SMU Perkins School of Theology and the board of pensions for the Presbyterian Church USA. My faith strengthens me in public service to people of other faiths and no faith at all. And as a person of faith and a government employee, I believe my church and the state are strongest when and because they are separate. For generations, my family has lived in the heart of Dallas's Jewish community, and growing up, many of my friends and neighbors were Jewish South African immigrants who moved to Dallas during apartheid. Their South African history ignited a passion in human rights for me. And after joining Amnesty International when I was 12 years old, because bands that I listened to recommended it, I helped co-found Amnesty International chapters at my high school and college, then traveled to South Africa after apartheid ended in my 20s and 30s, even meeting Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. I am committed to interfaith peace and justice, and my personal faith has comforted, strengthened, and protected me even when my world seemed quite literally to be falling apart. This community also taught me how to speak in public while smiling. In the introduction, it was mentioned I took tap dancing classes at Toby's School of Dance on Campbell Road. I was in elementary and junior high school musicals at Prestonwood and Park Hill, and at Canyon Creek Presbyterian was a church choir member and liturgist through high school. Then as a young adult, I returned to Canyon Creek as a junior high small group leader. For me, the best parts of being in a community as diverse and vibrant as ours is that it has taught me to be friends with lots of different kinds of people who held different views and to never burn bridges. I'm friends to this day with women I met in elementary school and junior high who are now doctors and nurses on the front lines of this pandemic working here in North Texas. And I'm speaking with you today on the recommendation of another woman I truly admire and who I have known since high school, Vicki Kim. In addition to being my friend and prayer partner, Vicki has coached me as an executive and even landed me my biggest freelance client in New York City. And that's where the really happy ending to my adversity story begins. After my father-in-law's funeral in the summer of 2018, my husband had a business trip to New York City and I joined him. While he worked, I networked. We had a eureka moment. His family no longer required our support. We didn't have kids, and we no longer had a mortgage or steady employment keeping us in Dallas. We could live anywhere. When I told this to a friend of mine in Dallas, he said, "Why are you here?" Then our friends who owned an apartment in Brooklyn received notice that their tenant was going to vacate, and they offered us to rent their place for the same price we were paying in downtown Dallas. It was 1/3 the square footage we had in Dallas, but still it was a sign, and I believe in and follow signs and symbols. So we gave notice to our Dallas landlord, sold our cars, bought our plane tickets, and a few months later, I was at the front door of my Brooklyn apartment, which I had never seen nor set foot in, suitcase in one hand, dog in the other, praying the key I had worked in the front door lock, which it did. Within the first week, I was going to live theater on Broadway and even saw a sold out Elton John concert at Madison Square Garden. Vicki Kim from J.J. Pierce High School, class of '92, got me a job as a freelance consultant helping New York clients to create and execute communication strategies informing corporate board members about artificial intelligence or AI, machine learning, automation, and blockchain. I ended up traveling to conferences, editing white papers, and producing panel discussions on these topics. One panelist at one of the sessions I was helping to produce explained how highlights videos and many news articles about sports are written and edited entirely by AI. This came as a shock to me because at the start of my career, the sports day section of the Dallas Morning News sustained other less lucrative sections like the arts section where I worked. But they also gave me valuable insight about questions that we as leaders need to be asking now so we can better care for one another and for future generations. Earlier, I stated we are not worth just what we earn, but do we recruit a diverse and inclusive candidate pool and hire and pay successful candidates equitably to change that? I hope we can discuss that more in the Q&A. But first, more happy ending. So the next cool twist is DNA testing and genealogical research revealed that my dad's side of the family is descended from Sephardic Jewish Spaniards, making me eligible for dual citizenship in Spain as part of the reparations the Spanish government is making for the Inquisition 500 years ago. So last year, I traveled to Spain to take my language and civics exams, which I passed. And when post-pandemic travel restrictions are lifted, pending approval by Spain's Ministry of Justice, I can gain residency and work status in the EU. One of the reasons Spain is repatriating its descendants is because following the nationalist dictatorship of Franco, they've been in decline ever since, population and economy-wise, and have never really rebounded from the Great Recession following the 2008 financial crisis. Spain has an almost entirely gig economy workforce and high poverty. It's very tough for a household to make more than $50,000 US annually, and a lot of their economy depends on tourism. The former nationalist countries of Spain and Italy are at risk of going extinct post-Franco and Mussolini because people there are dying faster than they are being born or than others are emigrating there. And in studying them, I see a lot we should consider now to avoid their fate in a generation or two. The US now faces the gravest threats of food and housing insecurity in our lifetime due to this pandemic. How may we transform business as usual to protect the health and safety of as many of our most vulnerable neighbors as possible? For example, of the thousands experiencing homelessness in Dallas County every day, 1 in 5 are children. What's the best we can do for them? So here's a quiz, and it's our final poll question. Within the next decade, what level of unemployment could result from jobs lost to AI, blockchain, machine learning, and automation? And unlike the other questions, this one does have a correct answer. So I'll go ahead and wait for the poll to close and share that it is estimated these technologies may lead to 30% unemployment by 2030. That is triple the US unemployment rate at its worst of 10% following the 2008 global financial crisis. And that is twice the peak of unemployment this year, 15% due to COVID-19. So in the midst of COVID-19, my husband and I decided to come back to Dallas to quarantine, driving cross country on April Fool's Day, no less. Then, believing in signs and symbols, I got a job offer from the city of Dallas to be their communications outreach and marketing director while we were quarantining. We broke our lease in Brooklyn. I accepted the job. We went from 0 to 60 on debt real fast because we bought a house and a car this summer. And I just celebrated 7 months with the city of Dallas. I'm still getting the hang of my job, and I have plenty of work to do. But in hindsight, this is the job that all my other personal and professional experiences have prepared me for. And I have empathy for all the Dallas residents who are now struggling due to the coronavirus, which is what inspires me every day to get them the information and the resources that they need. So in closing, I would like to make Dallas residents aware of resources, including free COVID testing, legal aid for tenants facing eviction, grocery delivery for free to people who have tested positive for COVID-19, and other health and financial resources. You can see them for yourself at dallascityhall.com/COVID-19, or you can call 214-670-INFO, and I just put that in the chat too. As I mentioned before, thanks to my Richardson education, I love science, and I know many people with Richardson ties whose lives now depend on us believing in science, including my parents who are in their 70s. So please continue to avoid close contact with people who don't live with you, which the CDC defines as being within 6 feet of someone for more than 15 minutes. And please also continue to wash your hands and cover your face with a mask until we're all vaccinated. Thank you. And with that, I will take any questions in the chat, or if you prefer to be called on, I can read your questions in the chat and then you can unmute to ask. Thanks again. I see a question asking, could I speak more to the practice of modeling empathy? And that question comes from Richardson resident Jeanette Alter, who is my former KERA colleague. So thank you, Jeanette, for being here, and thank you for asking. So empathy can't be taught, it can only be modeled. Again, I would say in the chat, this is a place to mention other ways that you can imagine or have seen empathy effectively modeled. I could have come up with a poll question about what does empathy mean to you? But I will say one of the books that I read during this time that I highly recommend is by the former head of Google China, whose name is Kai-Fu Lee. And it's a book called AI Superpowers, which I'll find the link for and share in the chat as well. And back to the kind of threats that technology may pose to our jobs.
There you are.
I see Carol and Scotty. You're off mute. I don't know if you mean to be. But the thing that he was talking about in terms of technology is that, you know, one thing that AI and technology can't do is out-human us as humans. So what really distinguishes us are qualities that cannot be measured by a test. And that was a mind-blowing thing for me too when I was a high school student at J.J. Pierce High School. After getting a poor grade on my psych teacher's test, Dr. Bob Nelson, he said, fortunately for you guys, I don't believe things that are valuable are measured by tests. And I was like, what? You know, again, people-pleasing perfectionist. I wasn't accustomed to that release from being bound by grades and GPAs and traditional accomplishments. So humor, kindness, compassion, you know, those are the things that only we can do. And in that book that I mentioned, or if you're not a reader, he was also the subject of a Frontline documentary on AI, where he said that, you know, the future of work is going to necessitate us doing things for our neighbors, like visiting people who are socially isolated, and finding ways to connect with people, which is obviously even more challenging now because of the pandemic, but I don't think the pandemic is going to be with us forever, hopefully not for much longer, relative to what we've already been through this year. And those things, those human connections and those human qualities are what can increase our capacity for empathy. I see another question saying, you appear to be an optimist. If so, is that because of your faith? I would say yes, and I would say I know lots of optimists who are non-theistic. But for me, certainly, optimism has been a result of my faith, the sum of my personal and professional experiences, and also brain training. I would recommend another great book by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. And again, if you're not a reader, she also gave a TED Talk that you can watch, but her book is entitled My Stroke of Insight. She had a stroke, and she was a brain researcher when she had her stroke in her 30s, which she describes as having reduced her to a toddler in the body of a woman. So she had to relearn everything in her 30s. And her stroke of insight was she didn't have to learn the bad habits that were consuming a lot of her energy. She only had to learn what she needed to be an adult capable of self-care. So she learned how to dress herself and practice good hygiene, but she didn't waste time learning how to be vain. She learned how to balance her checkbook and pay her bills. Who has a checkbook anymore? She learned how to, pay her bills without and keep up with her bank account, but she did not waste her time and energy being greedy, because all of those things, or being insecure about what others thought of her, making purchases with modest means, because those things took brain time and she just didn't have brain time for it. And she went so far as to even train her brain to only be negative twice a day because her circumstances were so challenging. She could have griped about her bad situation all day, every day. And she trained her brain that there were only 2 times a day that she was going to vent all of her frustrations. And that if she was in the middle of doing something else during those times, she had the choice of if she was going to stop what she was doing to be negative, or she was going to power through and be negative at her next scheduled interval. And that she was able to train her brain to be less negative. So I think optimism can be a practice. Oh, and I see that Jeanette has already posted the TED Talk. Thank you, from Jill Bolte Taylor. Okay, so Carol, were you raising your hand? Or Scotty, were you raising your hand to go off mute? Or was I just misreading? Was that just a wave of hello? You're on mute still now.
Okay, we're technologically challenged.
But you have so many other fine qualities.
We have a question about technology inequality, and how important and how devastating it is. And we have seen that with the school situations, but just in general, with people who are looking for a job and older people who are technologically challenged like us. But how are the social, religious, and governmental aspects of society going to deal with, the fact that some kids or some people have no access to technology at all?
So that's a terrific question. Thank you for it. And I will say, in the city of Dallas, we are relying on our business community to do it because we can't do it all. Our CARES Act funding has enabled us to make investment in technologies, including thousands of mobile hotspots that can be checked out from our branch libraries that offer curbside service starting this month. But even those are inadequate to the demand. We've also worked with Cisco to add Wi-Fi outside of underserved neighborhoods where we know that the bandwidth is slow. So people can, even though our rec centers and our libraries remain closed due to the pandemic, if people have devices that need Wi-Fi, they can come to the outside of branch libraries and rec centers and use the Wi-Fi from those buildings, from those public spaces. Another book. Well, I see a question in the chat, which ties into And my dad is the only person in the world who calls me Cass. So now you know his secret nickname for me. He says, how do I select what book I will read next? And I was actually going to suggest another book. So talking about technology and how we can close the digital divide. I think obviously Texas Instruments and other companies in North Texas have been great partners. AT&T is headquartered here. It's entirely within their power to use our city and its disparities as a lab to pilot experimental technologies that can help address these situations. And another book that I highly recommend is by Anand Giridharadas, who wrote a book called Winners Take All. And I'll post a link to that in the chat as well. But he talked about the fact that we have allowed the business community, including many organizations that many of you probably represent who are members of this chamber, to drive a lot of policy. So now in the times when our social safety net has gaping holes in it exposed, we need to ask more of our business community to help address those disparities. And in terms of how do I select what book I will read next, I would say that it is a combination of the periodicals that I subscribe to, the news shows that I watch, the podcasts that I listen to, and the recommendations of friends in a group like this. I see Bill Sproul is saying 30% of urban households who have access to high-speed internet cannot afford it, which is approximately 920,000 Texans who don't have access. And I would call that a million. I mean, and that seems low to me. I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think it takes, when I want things done, I ask a busy woman to do it. So this is the group of minds that can come up with suggestions and hopefully partner with local intergovernmental agencies who are doing as much as we can in as many ways as possible. But the culture of Texas is one of self-reliance, and that works well until we all get set back on our heels by something like this lasting longer than anticipated, and when it's not possible for us to get to the solutions needed fast enough just by going it alone. Oh, Dad, you're so good with the questions. John Cuer also asks, what are my favorite periodicals? So my house has the New Yorker magazine in every room, like wadded up, folded up, spread out. I like take it with me. I never get through an issue, but I always have an issue open that I'm reading somewhere in the house while I'm doing other things. The Economist is also highly recommended.
Atlantic.
I watch CBS pretty much all Sunday, from Sunday morning and Face the Nation through 60 Minutes. And I watch the PBS NewsHour every night. And I also watch Inside Texas Politics and Lone Star Politics every Sunday morning locally on Channel 5 and Channel 8. Just that.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I see another question in the chat, but you go first since you're off mute. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you were familiar with Heather Cox Richardson.
I am not.
Okay, that's someone that we need to introduce the world to.
Okay.
She is a Boston College professor of American history, and she does a daily column that is free. You can subscribe to it. And what she does is she keeps us up on what is going in our country, but with a historical perspective and with documentation. It's usually about maybe 3 pages max. And
okay, if you'll put it in the chat, that would be great for everybody. Or I can look at it. It's Heather Cox Richardson. I'll at least put the name in the chat so people can Google it.
Okay.
Right? Heather Cox Richardson. Is it COX?
Yes.
And Richardson, like this chamber.
Yes, that's
Excellent.
right.
Okay, I see another question in the chat from Vicky Chang, also referenced to my talk as Vicky Kim, asking, when I was looking for a next job, what was my plan of attack? And what happened when I kept hitting roadblocks to overcome the din, the boredom, etc.? Okay, so the plan of attack, which is also a pretty handy plan of attack for working from home in pandemic, is I still had to like get up, shower, and get dressed every day. I tried to go to the gym every day because that kind of distinguished where I slept from where I worked. So I viewed waking up at home and then going to exercise, which again is hard while gyms are necessarily closed for COVID-19. But I viewed that leaving the house, then coming home, showering and dressing as kind of the distinction between home where I slept and home where I worked. And the gym in the morning was a really important way for me to like blow off steam. So whatever anxiety or stress or depression I was holding on to in the job, I just tried to like, in the job search rather, I tried to like channel that as much as possible into the morning exercise routine. I actually joined a boxing gym, which was hilarious because I was like the oldest, fattest person in the boxing gym, but it was awesome to like just hit stuff every day. Not other people, just bags with my gloves and just like think of the things that were frustrating me and just knock the junk out of it. So that was part of it. And then there's an acronym I really like called HALT, which many of you may have already heard, to not allow yourself to get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So I tried to keep tabs on that and eat even when I had no appetite, and rest even when the anxiety was keeping me up at night, and reaching out to people by phone, if not in person, when I was feeling lonely. And anger, like I said, going to the gym helped me with the anger. I see one last question, and I think this will be our last for time. But for those who are not as resilient, what word can I give for encouragement? I did not start out this resilient. Resilience, sadly, is something that develops from adversity. You can't just flip a switch and suddenly be more resilient. You actually have to be tried in order to be, and tested in order to become more resilient. So once I learned those lessons, I was able to incorporate them into our family budget and continue practicing those things even when I wasn't under such extreme harsh circumstances. But I would just say, whatever you're going through, however embittering and unfair and unjust and frustrating and disappointing as it is, like, that is all real. And like I said earlier, developing the strategies that you need to survive all that is what we do as women and as resilient people and as leaders. And just because you're doing it doesn't mean that you want to be in that situation. It stinks, but the experience of powering through it will give you more power. And then once you have that power, sharing that with others can increase your empathy and the capacity others have for empathy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie from our sponsor at Geico.
Yes, hello.
Hello, fellow Richardson alumna.
Yes, thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing your story with us today. We definitely appreciate you sharing your experience of growing up in Richardson and how it prepared you to be a leader, even in times of adversity. And yes, as a fellow RISD, go Berkner, I definitely really I feel the same way about how amazing our city is. As stated earlier, the mission of Women in Leadership is to inspire, influence, and champion powerful women through advocacy, mentoring, and networking. If you are not a member of the Chamber and you're interested in joining the more than 900 current members who are working together to build our community, or if you're interested in being a part of our committee, please contact Andrea Young of the Richardson Chamber's events team, and she will take excellent care of you. One more item before we finish up, the Women in Leadership Committee wants your feedback on how we can better plan our luncheons and our other activities. You will find a link for a short survey on today's program right here in the chat room of the Zoom meeting. Andrea will probably be putting that in here in a minute. And we'll also email you the link to the survey as well. It's just a few short questions. It should take you less than a minute or so to complete. And by taking the survey, you'll be automatically entered in for a $25 gift card. Win-win. So now, who is ready for some door prizes? Since we're meeting virtually, we will have to use our handy dandy computerized roulette wheel, with all the names of everyone who is attending today, and that will help us pick the winners. So I will turn it over to Andrea to share what the prizes are and spin that wheel. No whammies.
So you can all probably see this wheel up here. We have the names of everyone who registered for today's event in this box over here. So I'm going to shuffle the list. And our first prize is a $25 e-gift card donated by Susan Casson of Ebby Halliday. So let's spin and see who's going to win that. And our winner is Diane McNulty with UT Dallas. So Diane, I will get you and Susan Casson connected so she can get that gift card to you. Congratulations. Let me shuffle those names again. And our second gift is a $25 e-gift card donated by Angela Powell with Powell Advantage, a supply chain consulting company. So let's spin for that second gift card. And our winner is, it looks like Letitia Sands with Atmos Energy. So Letitia, I will get you and Angela Powell connected and she will get that gift card to you. Our third and final raffle prize is a $25 e-gift card donated by Jeannie Jones of Wimmer Solutions. And our winner for that last gift card is going to be, looks like Kim Huron with the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Congratulations, Kim. And I will get you and Jeannie Jones connected. And congratulations to all three of you ladies. And we will get those gift cards out to you soon. Leslie?
All right, congratulations. Oops. Congratulations to everyone who won your prize. So we do want to thank you again for attending our virtual luncheon. And we hope that you will stay with us now and enjoy some networking in our breakout rooms for the next 30 minutes. Andrea is going to tell us how this will work, but we really want to tell you that we're very appreciative of you joining us today. And we wish you a very wonderful holiday season. And let's get into 2021. Let's leave 2020 behind. So I'll send it over to Andrea. Thank you guys so much. Take care.